The unexpected title, the Grand Court of the Alien Empire, was filled with silence. Thousands of nobles stood in their shining robes, their strange eyes glowing in the dim light. Tall banners of silver and green hung from the high walls, and the heir, throne of the queen, stood like a mountain at the far end. The hall smelled of burning incense and alien flowers, and in the middle of that endless silence stood a single human. He did not belong here. His clothes were plain compared to the jeweled robes of the nobles. His boots were dusty from travel. His heart pounded as he looked at the sea of alien faces staring at him. He had only come to deliver a message, but now every eye was fixed on him. Then it happened. A small voice broke the silence. The young prince, child of the alien queen, stepped forward from behind the throne. His skin glowed faintly, his crown was too big for his small head, and his eyes were bright like two suns. The boy looked at the human, pointed with his small hand, and said one word: "Father." The court froze. The human felt his blood turn to ice. He blinked, thinking he had misheard. But no, it was clear. The prince's voice echoed again, louder this time. "Father." Gasps filled the chamber. Nobles whispered, their words sharp and fast like knives. The sound of surprise rolled through the court like thunder. Some looked angry. Some looked afraid. Others looked confused. The human's throat went dry. He wanted to speak, to say something, but his lips refused to move. His legs felt weak. He had never seen this child before in his life. Why would the prince call him that? The queen rose slowly from her throne. Her gown shimmered like liquid metal, her crown heavy with jewels from 100 worlds. Her eyes, cold and sharp, stared first at her son, then at the human. The nobles fell silent again. Even the guards froze, waiting for her command. The boy did not move. He walked down the steps of the throne with small but steady steps. He stopped in front of the human and looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "You came back," the prince said softly. "I knew you would." The human's heart sank. His mind raced. What does he mean? Who does he think I am? The court erupted, in voices again. This is impossible. The prince speaks nonsense. No human could be father to the heir. Punish him. It is a trick. The guards gripped their weapons. The human swallowed hard. Any wrong word could mean death. But the queen lifted her hand, and silence fell once more. Her voice was calm, but it carried power strong enough to command armies. "My son," she said slowly, "do you know what you have spoken?" "Yes, mother," the prince said without fear. "He is my father." The queen's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, her long cloak flowing behind her. She looked at the human like she was studying a dangerous weapon. Her face showed no anger, only something deeper, harder to read. The human felt sweat on his back. He wanted to say, "This is a mistake. I am no father, I am no one." But his voice refused to rise. The queen stopped just a few steps away from him. Her gaze burned into him like fire. "You stand in my court," she said coldly, "and now my son calls you by the most forbidden name. Tell me, human, who are you?" The human opened his mouth, but no words came out. His mind was a storm. He thought of his past, of the battles he had seen, of the times he had saved strangers without asking for reward. Could it be possible that, in some forgotten moment, he had once crossed paths with the prince? Could the child truly remember him? The nobles grew restless again. Many shouted for his death, others demanded exile. The court split into chaos, their voices rising like a storm. The queen raised her hand once more. The hall fell silent. Her voice was softer now, almost like a whisper, but it carried across the room. "Bring him to me." The guards stepped forward. Their spears glowed with deadly energy. The human's stomach twisted. His every instinct screamed to run, but there was no escape. Slowly, they pushed him forward toward the queen. The prince followed close behind, still calling him father with a smile that melted hearts. The nobles leaned forward, hungry for blood, eager for drama. The entire empire watched in silence as one question filled the air. Was this human truly the father of the prince? Or was this the greatest mistake of his life? And as the queen's cold hand lifted toward him, the human felt the weight of destiny pressing down on his shoulders. The silence of the court returned, heavier than before. A dangerous mistake? The human's boots echoed against the polished stone floor as the guards pushed him forward. The weight of 1,000 alien eyes pressed down on his back. The queen's order, "Bring him to me," still rang inside his ears. He had never felt so small, so out of place, and yet... The prince's innocent smile followed him like a torch in the dark. Why would the boy call him father? Was it madness, a trick, or something far more dangerous? The guards stopped in front of the throne. Their weapons gleamed with blue light, ready to strike if the queen gave even the smallest command. The human dared not lift his head. His knees bent under the pressure, but he forced himself to stand tall. The queen's gaze cut through him, cold, sharp. Her eyes were not only looking at him, they were searching his soul. "Human," she said at last, her voice steady, calm, yet dangerous. "Do you understand the weight of the words spoken in my court?" The hall was silent. Nobles leaned forward, listening with greedy ears. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed louder than thunder. The human swallowed. "Your Majesty, I do not understand why he called me that. I swear I—" "Silence!" a noble shouted from the side. His robe was covered in golden chains and his face twisted with rage. "This is a crime. The heir of the throne cannot call a human father. End this charade now, my queen. End him." A roar of agreement shook the chamber. Dozens of nobles raised their voices, demanding blood. Some even stepped forward, pointing fingers at the human as if he were an infection that must be burned away. The guards tightened their grip on their weapons. But then, enough. The queen's voice was quiet, yet it silenced the entire hall. In an instant, her eyes never left the human. She stepped down from her throne, her long gown brushing the floor like liquid silver. She stopped just inches from him. Her presence was so strong that even the air felt heavy. "Look at me," she commanded. The human raised his eyes. His chest tightened. For a moment, he thought he saw sorrow hidden behind her sharp gaze. Sorrow buried deep, like a wound long forgotten. "My son does not speak carelessly," the queen continued. "He has never called anyone father. Not even his tutors. Not even my generals. Today, in front of all, he chose you." The human's lips parted, but he could not find words. The queen leaned closer, her whisper carrying enough power to freeze his blood. "So tell me, who are you really?" The human's mind spun. He wanted to shout the truth. "I am no one, just a traveler. I don't even belong in this place." But the prince's small hand suddenly tugged at his arm. The boy looked up at him with eyes full of trust. "You promised you would come back. I waited. And now you're here." The hall erupted again. Shocked gasps, angry voices, fearful whispers. The human's heart thudded painfully. He searched his memory. Dusty battlefields, ruined villages, lost children. Had he saved a boy once? Could this prince be the same? Or was this just a child's imagination twisted by time and loneliness? The queen raised her hand, silencing the nobles once more. Her voice dropped lower, almost gentle. "My son's words cannot be ignored, yet neither can the law. If you are not his father, then you are a danger. If you are, then the fate of this court will change forever." The nobles shouted in protest. "This is madness." The boy is confused. "No human should stand before us like this." The queen's eyes flashed with power. "Enough." Silence fell again. She turned back to the human. "If you truly are nothing, then you will fail. But if my son speaks truth, the trials will show it." The human's blood ran cold. "Trials?" "Yes." Her voice was sharp again. "You will face the ancient tests, the trials of the Father. They will reveal who you are, whether you are a liar, a fool, or chosen." The nobles cheered at the word trials. Some laughed cruelly, already picturing his death. Others whispered, their fear growing. The prince squeezed his hand tighter. You will pass. I know you will. The human's throat was dry. He wanted to tell the boy not to hope, not to trust him. But when he looked into the child's bright eyes, something stirred inside him. Something he thought he had buried long ago. The instinct to protect. The queen stepped back, her voice rising like a hammer striking stone. Prepare him. At dawn, the trials begin. The guards seized his arms. The court erupted in noise, cheers, shouts, curses. The human was dragged toward the dungeon beneath the palace. Every step echoed with the weight of destiny. As the heavy doors closed behind him, the last thing he saw was the prince's face pressed against the guard's arms, whispering one word again and again. Father, Father, Father. And deep, inside the darkness, the human wondered if those words were his doom, or the beginning of something greater than he could imagine. The trial of the father. The dungeon door groaned open again. Pale morning light poured in, cutting through the shadows where the human had spent the night. His body ached from wounds, but his spirit still burned. He had survived the trial of courage. He had slain the beast that none thought he could face. But now the second day had arrived. The court awaited him again. The guards dragged him up the stone stairs, chains clinking with each step. Above, the alien city glimmered with crystal towers, but the air was heavy with whispers of his fate. Everywhere, aliens leaned from balconies, pointing at him, spitting insults, some even throwing petals as if mocking his coming death. The great courtyard was filled again. Thousands of nobles sat in their jeweled seats, their eyes glowing with hunger for blood. The queen sat tall on her throne, calm and unreadable, and beside her, the prince leaned forward eagerly, his small hands gripping the armrest. When the human appeared, a wave of noise shook the air. Cheers, curses, and laughter blended into a storm. But the only sound he cared about was the boy's soft voice. Father, you can do it. The announcer stepped forward, his voice loud and sharp. Yesterday, the human faced the trial of courage. Today he shall face the trial of loyalty. Will he betray himself? Will he betray the prince? Or will he prove his heart true? The crowd erupted. Some shouted bets, others jeered. The human narrowed his eyes. Trial of loyalty? What trick awaited him this time? The queen raised her hand. The noise stopped instantly. With a flick of her fingers, the ground of the courtyard shifted. Panels of stone opened and several figures rose on platforms. The human froze. Before him stood prisoners, alien captives, chained and frightened. Men, women, and even children. Their eyes were hollow with despair. The announcer's voice rang out again. The choice is simple. Save the innocent or save yourself. If you try to free them, you will face certain death. If you turn away, you may live to see another trial. Choose, human. Show your loyalty. The nobles roared with approval. They expected him to hesitate. They expected him to fail. The human's chest tightened. He remembered the war. He remembered the faces of those he had once saved, the very moment that had tied him to the prince. He could not stand aside, but before he could act, the queen spoke. Her voice was low, yet it carried across the entire court. Be warned, human. If you touch those chains, you take on their burden. Their crimes, their fates, their enemies, everything will be yours to carry. The human raised his head. Then, so be it. The crowd gasped. The guards raised their weapons, ready to strike him down before he even moved. But the queen lifted her hand to stop them. Let him act. Let the trial judge him. The human stepped forward. The first prisoner trembled, eyes wide with disbelief. The chains glowed with deadly energy, designed to kill anyone who touched them. But the human wrapped his hands around the glowing metal anyway. The pain was instant, like fire crawling into his veins. He gritted his teeth, refusing to scream. The crowd leaned forward, eager for him to fall, but he pulled with all his strength, ignoring the burning agony. With a sharp crack, the chain broke. The prisoner fell to the ground, free. The stands erupted in chaos. Nobles shouted in disbelief. Some screamed for his death. Others whispered that perhaps he was chosen after all. The human moved to the next prisoner. Again, the chains burned his flesh. Again, he pulled until they snapped. One by one, the captives fell free, staring at him in shock and awe. The last captive was a child no older than the prince. Her wide eyes filled with tears as he bent down and broke her chains. He lifted her up gently, whispering, "You're free now." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. The prince jumped to his feet, clapping with pure joy. I knew it. I knew he would save them. The queen's face, however, was unreadable. She rose slowly from her throne, her gown flowing like silver fire. "You have passed the trial of loyalty," she declared. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with something unspoken. "You risked your life for strangers, just as you once did for my son." The human's body trembled, sweat dripping from his skin. His arms blistered from the burning chains. But he stood tall, refusing to show weakness. The nobles were in chaos. Some demanded his death anyway, calling the trial a trick. Others bowed, their heads in silence, unable to deny what they had witnessed. The queen raised her hand. "Enough. The law is clear. 2 trials complete, 1 remains. Tomorrow, the final trial will decide his fate." Her words cut through the noise. The crowd fell into uneasy murmurs. The human felt the guard seize him again, dragging him back toward the dungeon. But this time, something was different. The eyes of the people had changed. Fear lingered, but so did respect. As the doors closed, behind him the prince's voice carried across the courtyard one last time. "Father, you are not alone." The words sank deep into the human's heart. He clenched his fists, his body shaking from pain, but his spirit unbroken. He had survived 2 trials. He had earned a place in the memory of this court. But he knew the hardest test was yet to come. For tomorrow, the queen herself would rise against him. The secret passed. The dungeon was cold and silent. Its walls were carved from black stone, damp with dripping water. The human sat on the floor, his wrists bound with glowing chains. Each link pulsed with alien energy, biting into his skin whenever he moved too much. He had faced wars before. He had fought battles on ruined planets. He had seen death, betrayal, and pain. But this was different. Here, in this alien empire, he was no soldier. He was prey. Above his head, the court still argued. Nobles plotted, whispered, and laughed at his fate. By dawn, the trials would begin. Everyone expected him to fail. Everyone expected him to die. And yet, the words of the prince still echoed inside his skull. "You came back. I knew you would." The boy's voice was so certain, so full of trust. But how could that be? The human shook his head. He had never been a father, never had a child. He had lived his life wandering, helping strangers, fighting wars that were not his own. So why did the prince believe otherwise? The chains glowed, brighter as the dungeon door opened. A guard entered, followed by a figure cloaked in dark robes. The human frowned. The figure moved like a shadow, silent but purposeful. When the hood lowered, the human saw an elder noble with gray skin marked by deep scars. His eyes burned with suspicion. "You," the elder whispered. "I remember you." The human's heart jumped. "Remember me? From where?" The elder leaned closer. "Years ago, during the War of the Broken Stars, a human soldier appeared on the battlefield. He carried no flag, no rank, but he fought like 10 men. He saved a caravan of refugees. One of them was the queen's lost child." The human's breath caught. His mind flashed back. Dusty skies, burning ships, screams of battle. He remembered pulling children from the wreckage, shielding them with his own body. But in the chaos, he had not known who they were. He had only done what he always did, protect the innocent. "That boy," the elder continued, "he was the prince. He never forgot your face. even when the court told him it was only a dream. He held on to the memory, and now here you stand. The human's chest tightened. He remembered the small boy clinging to him, crying, refusing to let go. He had promised the child he would survive. He had promised, even though he did not know his name. Could that promise be why the prince now called him father? Before he could answer, the elder stepped back. Be careful, the nobles do not want the truth, they want you dead. If you pass the trials, you will shake the empire. If you fail, they will erase you. The guard shoved the elder out and slammed the door shut again. Darkness returned, but the human no longer sat in confusion. He finally understood why the boy had spoken those words. Still, a storm raged inside him. He was no father. He was no king. He was just a wanderer who had once saved a child in a moment of war. Could such a simple act now change the fate of an empire? At dawn, the dungeon doors opened again. The guards dragged him out into the blinding light of the courtyard. Thousands of aliens filled the stands, cheering, waiting for blood. The trials of the father had not been performed for centuries, yet today the court was hungry to see them. The queen sat on her throne above, her eyes unreadable. The prince sat beside her, clutching the armrest, his gaze fixed on the human, the sea. First trial began. A massive beast was released from the gates, its body covered in black scales, its mouth dripping with green fire. The nobles cheered as the monster roared, shaking the ground. This is the trial of courage, the announcer shouted. If the human is truly father to the heir, let him show his strength. If not, let him be devoured. The human's chains fell off with a flash of light. He was free but unarmed. The beast charged forward, claws tearing the earth. For a moment, fear gripped him. He had no weapon, no armor. The crowd screamed for his death. But then he heard it. One small voice among thousands. Father, you can do it. The prince's cry pierced through the chaos. The human's legs steadied, his hands curled into fists. He had survived worse. He had protected before. He would protect again. The beast lunged. The human rolled aside, grabbing a broken spear from the ground. He leapt forward, striking the beast's eye. It roared in pain, swinging its tail, but he held his ground. The fight raged on. Dust filled the air. Blood spilled across the stone. The nobles cheered louder, expecting him to fall at any moment. But the human refused. Every time he wanted to give up, he heard the boy's voice again. Father, father, father. At last, with one final strike, he drove the spear into the beast's throat. It collapsed with a thunderous crash, shaking the earth beneath their feet. The courtyard went silent. The human stood over the fallen beast, his chest heaving, his body bruised but alive. From the throne, the queen rose slowly. Her expression had changed. Not anger, not suspicion. Something else. Something almost like respect. The nobles whispered in shock. Some looked afraid. Others looked furious. The prince stood, clapping his small hands, tears in his eyes. I knew it. I knew you would win. The queen lifted her hand to silence the crowd. Her voice carried across the courtyard like a blade of steel. The first trial is complete. The human lives. Tomorrow he will face the next. The nobles shouted in protest. Many demanded his death anyway. But the queen's command was law. As the guards dragged him back to the dungeon, the human's thoughts swirled. He now knew the truth of the boy's memory. He now understood why the prince called him father, but he also knew something else. Passing the trials would not just prove his innocence. It would change everything. And deep inside, he wondered if he truly wanted that fate. The duel with the queen. The sun burned red as it rose above the alien city. The great courtyard was already full, alive with whispers and shouts. Nobles in jeweled robes filled the seats, their eyes glowing like fireflies in the shadows. Today was different. Today was the final trial. The human stood in the center of the courtyard, his body bruised from the battles of the past days. His arms still carried burns from breaking the chains. His chest ached from the fight with the beast. Yet he stood tall, refusing to bow, refusing to show weakness. The announcer's voice rang across the air. Today begins the third and final test, the trial of the Father. And who shall test him? The crowd hushed. All eyes turned to the throne. The Queen rose. Her silver gown shimmered in the light. Her crown glittered with jewels from 100 conquered worlds. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with hidden fire. I will, she declared. The court erupted in shock. Nobles gasped, shouted even, stood in protest. Some cried, "It is forbidden. The Queen cannot fight." Others whispered, "She will destroy him." The prince's small voice rose above the noise. "Mother, please don't hurt him." But the Queen did not look at her son. Her gaze never left the human. She stepped down the stairs, her every movement full of grace and power. In her hand appeared a long blade, its edge glowing with blue fire. The human's throat tightened. He had faced beasts, chains, and death. But now he was to face the Queen herself, the most powerful being in the Empire. The announcer's voice shook as he cried, "If he defeats the Queen, he earns the title given by the prince. If he falls, he dies, and his name will be erased forever." The crowd roared. The Queen raised her blade. "Defend yourself." The human glanced around. No weapon had been given to him, no shield, nothing. He clenched his fists, his breath heavy. "Why?" he asked. His voice was rough but steady. "Why must you fight me yourself?" The Queen's eyes narrowed. "Because only I can judge the man my son calls father." The courtyard fell silent. She struck first. The blade flashed, like lightning aimed at his chest. The human leapt back, barely avoiding death. The stone floor cracked where the blade hit, sparks flying into the air. The fight began. The Queen moved with speed beyond human eyes. Each strike of her blade was precise, merciless, full of power. The human dodged, rolled, stumbled, his body pushed to its limit. He had no weapon, yet he refused to fall. The crowd cheered every strike, hungry for blood. But the prince screamed from his throne, "Stop! Don't hurt him!" His small voice cracked, but no one listened. The Queen's blade slashed again, grazing the human's arm. Blood dripped down, but he did not cry out. He stood firm, his chest rising and falling like a storm. "I won't fight you," he said. His voice was hoarse but strong. The Queen's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Then her strikes grew faster, harsher, forcing him to the ground. "Why?" she demanded as her blade cut the air near his throat. "Why do you not fight back?" The human's eyes burned with fire. "Because the boy calls you mother, and no father should raise his hand against the mother of his child." The words struck deeper than any blade. The Queen froze for an instant. Her eyes flickered with something: pain, memory, doubt. And in that very instant, it happened. From the shadows of the court, a cloaked figure leapt forward. A dagger flashed in the light, aimed straight for the Queen's back. The human saw it, before anyone else. Instinct moved his body. He surged forward, shoving the Queen aside. The dagger struck his shoulder instead, sinking deep. Blood poured down, but he grabbed the assassin's arm and twisted until bone cracked. The assassin screamed, falling to the ground. Guards rushed in, dragging him away. The court erupted in chaos. Nobles shouted, some in fear, some in fury. The Queen stared at the human, shock in her eyes. He had saved her life, at the cost of his own blood. The prince ran down from the throne, tears streaming. "Father, no, don't die!" The human dropped to one knee, clutching his bleeding shoulder. But he smiled weakly at the boy. "I'm not going anywhere." The Queen lowered her blade. For the first time, her voice trembled. "Why? Why would you save me even as I tried to kill you?" The human's answer was simple. "Because he needs both of us." Silence filled the courtyard. The nobles were speechless. The boy clung to his side, refusing to let go. And the Queen, for the first time in years, lowered her head, not as a ruler, but as a mother. The trial had ended, though no one declared it. The people, had seen the truth. The human had shown loyalty, courage, and love. He had faced the queen herself, and instead of fighting, he had protected. The queen turned to the court, her voice firm yet softer than ever before. Perhaps he truly is the one. The nobles erupted again, but their noise was weak compared to before. The human had proven something none of them could deny, and as the guards carried the assassin away, whispers of rebellion stirred through the shadows. The human had survived the queen's blade. But a greater storm was coming. The court's rebellion. The courtyard was still trembling from the failed assassination. The assassin had been dragged away in chains, but his cry still echoed in the air. The nobles whispered fiercely among themselves, their voices like buzzing insects. Some shouted for the human's death, others demanded answers. The queen stood silent, her blade lowered, her eyes fixed on the human who still bled from his wound. The prince knelt beside him, refusing to let go of his arm. "He saved you," the boy cried. His small voice cracked through the storm of arguments. "He saved us both." But the court did not listen. One noble, tall and broad, with a face carved in anger, rose from his seat. His robe shimmered with golden chains. His voice thundered across the courtyard. "This is shame," he roared. "Our queen lowers her head to a human. Our prince dares to call him father. This is betrayal of the throne." The crowd roared in agreement. Others shouted, "Yes, remove the queen, take the throne for ourselves." The human's chest tightened. He could feel the storm rising. This was no longer about him, it was about power. The queen raised her hand, commanding silence. "Do not mistake my patience for weakness," she warned. "I am still your queen." But the nobles did not bow. Instead, dozens of them stood, their jeweled cloaks falling like banners of war. Their eyes burned with rebellion. The broad noble pointed at the human. "This man is poison. If we allow him to live, our empire will crumble. If the boy accepts him, our bloodline will end. I say we strike now." The crowd split. Half the nobles shouted for war, half remained silent in fear. Guards gripped their weapons, uncertain who to obey. The prince clung tighter to the human's arm. "Don't leave me, father," he whispered, tears streaking his face. The human rose slowly, despite the blood on his shoulder. His voice was steady. "If you want my life, take it. But do not harm the boy." The nobles laughed cruelly. "Hear him. He admits weakness. He is no father, only a beggar in our court." The queen stepped forward, her voice sharp as steel. "Enough. You speak rebellion in my presence. Do you think I will forgive this?" The broad noble sneered. "You have already betrayed us, queen. You let a human stand beside you. If you will not protect the throne, then we will take it." A horn blasted from the back of the courtyard. The palace gates burst open and armed rebels stormed in. Their armor glowed crimson, their weapons humming with deadly light. The nobles who had stood now cheered, joining their forces. The rebellion had begun. The queen's guards rushed to form a line, but they were outnumbered. The courtyard turned into chaos. Blades clashed, screams filled the air, and the sky above burned as enemy ships broke through the city's defenses. The prince cried out in terror, clutching the human's side. "Father, don't let them take us." The human's blood boiled. He had sworn no oath to this court, no loyalty to the nobles. But the boy's trust bound him tighter than any chain. He could not let the child fall into their hands. He grabbed a fallen guard's spear, spinning it in his hand. "Stay behind me," he told the boy firmly. Rebels rushed forward. The human met them head-on. Despite his wounds, he moved with strength, born from years of survival. His spear cut through armor, his fists struck with fury. The prince clung to his cloak, trembling but refusing to let go. From the throne, the queen fought as well. Her blade flashed like lightning, cutting down traitors who dared to challenge her. Her gown was torn, her crown cracked, but she stood unbroken. For a moment, the human and the queen fought side by side, her blade, his spear, striking as one. But the rebels were many, the courtyard filled with smoke and fire. Cries of pain echoed. The nobles who had remained loyal tried to resist, but they were few. The broad noble climbed onto the throne, his voice booming. "The queen has fallen. The human has corrupted the prince. Take them alive. The empire belongs to us." The human's fury erupted. He leapt forward, his spear slicing the noble's banner in two. The broad noble staggered back, fear flashing in his eyes. The queen's voice rose, filled with power. "Traitors, you dare to claim my throne? Then you will drown in your own blood." But even as she shouted, more enemy ships descended from the sky. Explosions shook the city. The palace trembled. The human grabbed the prince, shielding him as debris rained down. The boy buried his face against his chest, sobbing. "Father," the boy whispered, "don't let them take me. Don't let them win." The human's jaw tightened. He looked at the queen, their eyes meeting across the battlefield. For the first time, there was no anger between them, only understanding. They were outnumbered. The rebellion had begun, but neither of them would surrender. Not while the prince still lived. The queen raised her blade. The human lifted his spear. Together they stood against the storm as the empire burned around them. And in that burning courtyard, with rebels closing in on every side, the human realized the truth. This was no longer just the prince's fight, this was his fight too. Father of a kingdom. The palace shook as explosions echoed across the city. Flames lit the sky and the sound of war drums rolled like thunder. The rebellion had begun in full. Rebels poured into the courtyard, their red armor glowing in the smoke. The Tao, human, stood with the prince pressed against his chest, spear gripped tightly in his other hand. His wounds burned, his muscles screamed, but his spirit refused to break. Beside him, the queen raised her blazing sword, her gown torn, her crown bent. She was no longer only a ruler. She was a mother fighting for her son. "Protect the heir," she cried, her voice a roar of command. Loyal guards formed a circle around them, though they were few. The rebels swarmed like a tide, blades flashing, voices filled with fury. The human planted his feet. His eyes locked on the prince, whose small hands gripped his cloak tightly. "They will not take you," he whispered. The first wave of rebels charged. The human spear thrust forward, piercing armor. He spun, slammed another with the shaft, then raised his arm to shield the boy from a wild strike. The queen moved beside him, her blade slicing in arcs of blue fire. Together, they fought, their movements flowing as if they had trained as one. The nobles who had betrayed them cheered from the edges, believing victory was near. But for every rebel that fell, the fear in their eyes grew. The broad noble, the one who had led the rebellion, shouted from the throne, "Kill the human! Kill the queen! Take the prince alive!" The human's blood boiled. His spear flew across the courtyard, striking one of the noble's guards through the chest. "You will not touch him," he roared. The prince lifted his head, his voice small but fierce. "Father, you can win." Those words cut deeper than any wound. They gave him strength. He grabbed another fallen blade, swinging with raw fury, carving a path through the storm. But the rebels were many. The loyal guards fell one by one. The queen staggered, her arm bleeding, her blade still shining but slower than before. The broad noble laughed cruelly. "You cannot stop us. The throne belongs to us now." At that moment, the human did something no one expected. He lifted the prince high into the air and shouted with a voice that shook the courtyard, "This boy is your future, not me, not her, him. And if you want to reach him, you will have to kill me first." The rebels hesitated. For a heartbeat, even the broad noble faltered. The sight of a wounded human standing tall, carrying the heir of the empire in his arms, struck something in them. The queen's eyes widened. She had ruled with fear. She had commanded armies with power. But in that moment, she saw how this man, this outsider, moved hearts without crowns or thrones. The hesitation broke when the broad noble roared, "Attack!" The rebels charged again. The human placed the prince behind him and fought like a storm unleashed. Every strike was fueled by one thought: protect the child. The queen, bleeding but unbroken, fought at his side. Their blades and strikes wove together, cutting through the chaos. Then the human saw his chance. He grabbed the fallen banner pole, heavy with the rebel's crest. With a mighty swing, he broke it across the broad noble's face, sending him crashing from the throne. The courtyard gasped. The rebel's leader had fallen. The human stood above him, chest heaving, blood dripping, the prince clinging to his side. He raised the broken banner pole high and his voice thundered, "This rebellion ends here." The rebels froze. The queen stepped beside him, her blade still glowing. She placed her hand on the human's shoulder and looked to her people. "You call him poison," she said, her voice low but steady, "but he has bled for this court. He has saved my life. He has protected my son. And now he has defended this throne when many of you betrayed it." Her eyes swept across the nobles, sharp and unyielding. "From this day, he is no longer an outsider. He is father to my son, and protector of our kingdom." The courtyard fell silent. Then slowly, like a wave, heads began to bow. Even those who had doubted could not deny what they had seen. The prince's small voice rose above the silence. "I told you all. He is my father." The human looked down at the boy, then at the queen. He had never asked for this. He had never wanted power or titles or crowns. But in their eyes, he saw something he could not turn away from. Trust. The queen raised her hand, and her voice carried like thunder. "Let it be written. Let it be known. From this day forward, the man my son has chosen shall be protector of, the heir and protector of this throne." The crowd erupted not with anger but with reluctant acceptance. Some cheered, some wept. Some trembled in silence. The human stood bloodied but unbroken, the prince at his side, the queen at his shoulder. He had come into the court as a stranger. Now he stood as something far greater. And as the fires of rebellion faded, the boy looked up at him with shining eyes. "Father, we won." The human looked out at the stars above the burning city. For the first time he wondered not if he belonged here, but if this was the place destiny had meant for him all along. One thought echoed in his heart. If one alien prince calls me father today, what will the galaxy call me tomorrow?